Tiberius was a Roman emperor from 14 AD to 37 AD. Born Tiberius Claudius Nero, a Claudian, Tiberius was the son of Tiberius Claudius Nero and Livia Drusilla. His mother divorced Nero and married Octavian, later known as Augustus, in 39 BC, making him a stepson of Octavian. Tiberius would later marry Augustus' daughter, Julia the Elder, and even later be adopted by Augustus, by which act he officially became a Julian, bearing the name Tiberius Julius Caesar. The subsequent emperors after Tiberius would continue this blended dynasty of both families for the following 30 years. Historians have named it the Julio-Claudian dynasty. In relations to the other emperors of this dynasty, Tiberius was the stepson of Augustus, grand-uncle of Caligula, paternal uncle of Claudius, and great-grand-uncle of Nero. Tiberius was one of Rome's greatest generals. His conquest of Pannonia, Dalmatia, Rhaetia, and temporarily, parts of Germania, laid the foundations for the northern frontier, but he came to be remembered as a dark, reclusive, and somber ruler who never really desired to be emperor. Pliny the Elder called him Tristissimus Hominum, the gloomiest of men. After the death of Tiberius' son Drusus Julius Caesar in 23 AD, he became more reclusive and aloof. In 26 AD, Tiberius removed himself from Rome and left administration largely in the hands of his unscrupulous praetorian prefects Lucius Aelius, Saturninus and Quintus Naevius Sartorius Macro. Caligula, Tiberius' grandnephew and adopted grandson, succeeded Tiberius upon his death. Early life. Background: Tiberius was born in Rome on 16 November 42 BC to Tiberius Claudius Nero and Livia Drusilla. In 39 BC his mother divorced his biological father and remarried Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus shortly thereafter, while still pregnant with Tiberius Nero's son. In 38 BC his brother, Nero Claudius Drusus, was born. Little is recorded of Tiberius's early life. In 32 BC Tiberius made his first public appearance at the age of 9, delivering the eulogy for his biological father. In 29 BC, both he and his brother Drusus rode in the triumphal chariot along with their adoptive father Octavian in celebration of the defeat of Antony and Cleopatra at Actium. In 23 BC Emperor Augustus became gravely ill and his possible death threatened to plunge the Roman world into chaos again. Historians generally agree that it is during this time that the question of Augustus' heir became most acute, and while Augustus had seemed to indicate that Agrippa and Marcellus would carry on his position in the event of his death, the ambiguity of succession became Augustus' chief problem. In response, a series of potential heirs seem to have been selected, among them Tiberius and his brother Drusus. In 24 BC at the age of 17 Tiberius entered politics under Augustus' direction, receiving the position of quaestor, and was granted the right to stand for election as praetor and consul 5 years in advance of the age required by law. Similar provisions were made for Drusus' civil and military career. Shortly thereafter Tiberius began appearing in court as an advocate, and it is presumably here that his interest in Greek rhetoric began. In 20 BC, Tiberius was sent east under Marcus Agrippa. The Parthians had captured the standards of the legions under the command of Marcus Licinius Crassus, Decidius Saxa, and Mark Antony. After a year of negotiation, Tiberius led a sizable force into Armenia, presumably with the goal of establishing it as a Roman client state and ending the threat it posed on the Roman-Parthian border. Augustus was able to reach a compromise whereby the standards were returned, and Armenia remained a neutral territory between the two powers. After returning from the east in 19 BC, Tiberius was married to Vipsania Agrippina, the daughter of Augustus's close friend and greatest general, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. He was appointed to the position of praetor, and sent with his legions to assist his brother Drusus in campaigns in the west. while Drusus focused his forces in Gallia Narbonensis and along the German frontier. Tiberius combated the tribes in the Alps and within Transalpine Gaul, conquering Rhaetia. In 15 BC he discovered the sources of the Danube, and soon afterwards the bend of the middle course. Returning to Rome in 13 BC, Tiberius was appointed as consul, and around this same time his son, Drusus Julius Caesar, was born. Agrippa's death in 12 BC elevated Tiberius and Drusus with respect to the succession. At Augustus' request in 11 BC, Tiberius divorced Vipsania and married Julia the Elder, Augustus' daughter and Agrippa's widow. This event seems to have been the breaking point for Tiberius. His new marriage with Julia was never a happy one, and produced only a single child who died in infancy. Reportedly, Tiberius once ran into Vipsania again, and proceeded to follow her home crying and begging forgiveness. Soon afterwards, Tiberius met with Augustus, and steps were taken to ensure that Tiberius and Vipsania would never meet again. Tiberius continued to be elevated by Augustus, and after Agrippa's death and his brother Drusus' death in 09 BC, seemed the clear candidate for succession. As such, in 12 BC he received military commissions in Pannonia and Germania, both areas highly volatile and of key importance to Augustan policy. In 06 BC, Tiberius launched a pincer movement against the Marcomanni, setting out northwest from Carnuntum on the Danube with 4 legions. Tiberius passed through Quadi territory in order to invade the Marcomanni from the east. Meanwhile, General Gaius Sentius Saturninus would depart east from Mogontiacum on the Rhine with 2 or 3 legions, pass through newly annexed Hermunduri territory, and attack the Marcomanni from the west. The campaign was a resounding success. But Tiberius could not subjugate the Marcomanni because he was soon summoned to the Rhine frontier to protect Rome's new conquests in Germania. He returned to Rome and was consul for a second time in 07 BC, and in 06 BC was granted tribunician power and control in the east, all of which mirrored positions that Agrippa had previously held. However, despite these successes and despite his advancement, Tiberius was not happy. Retirement to Rhodes in 06 BC, on the verge of accepting command in the east and becoming the second most powerful man in Rome, Tiberius suddenly announced his withdrawal from politics and retired to Rhodes. The precise motives for Tiberius's withdrawal are unclear. Historians have speculated a connection with the fact that Augustus had adopted Julia's sons by Agrippa, Gaius and Lucius, and seemed to be moving them along the same political path that both Tiberius and Drusus had trodden. Tiberius's move thus seemed to be an interim solution. He would hold power only until his stepsons would come of age, and then be swept aside. The promiscuous, and very public behavior of his unhappily married wife, Julia, may have also played a part. Indeed, Tacitus calls it Tiberiusa intima causa, his innermost reason for departing for Rhodes, and seems to ascribe the entire move to a hatred of Julia and a longing for Vipsania. Tiberius had found himself married to a woman he loathed, who publicly humiliated him with nighttime escapades in the Forum, and forbidden to see the woman he had loved. Whatever Tiberius's motives, the withdrawal was almost disastrous for Augustus's succession plans. Gaius and Lucius were still in their early teens, and Augustus, now 57 years old, had no immediate successor. There was no longer a guarantee of a peaceful transfer of power after Augustus's death, nor a guarantee that his family, and therefore his family's allies, would continue to hold power should the position of princeps survive. Somewhat apocryphal stories tell of Augustus pleading with Tiberius to stay, even going so far as to stage a serious illness. Tiberius's response was to anchor off the shore of Ostia until word came that Augustus had survived, then sailing straightway for Rhodes. Tiberius reportedly regretted his departure and requested to return to Rome several times, but each time Augustus refused his requests. heir to Augustus. With Tiberius's departure, succession rested solely on Augustus' two young grandsons, Lucius and Gaius Caesar. The situation became more precarious in AD 2 with the death of Lucius. Augustus, with perhaps some pressure from Livia, allowed Tiberius to return to Rome as a private citizen and nothing more. In AD 4, Gaius was killed in Armenia, and Augustus had no other choice but to turn to Tiberius. The death of Gaius in AD 4 initiated a flurry of activity in the household of Augustus. Tiberius was adopted as full son and heir, and in turn, he was required to adopt his nephew, Germanicus, the son of his brother Drusus and Augustus' niece Antonia Minor. Along with his adoption, Tiberius received tribunician power as well as a share of Augustus's Maius Imperium, something that even Marcus Agrippa may never have had. In AD 7, Agrippa Postumus, a younger brother of Gaius and Lucius, was disowned by Augustus and banished to the island of Pianosa, to live in solitary confinement. Thus, when in AD 13, the powers held by Tiberius were made equal, rather than second, to Augustus's own powers, he was for all intents and purposes of co-princeps with Augustus, and in the event of the latter's passing, would simply continue to rule without an interregnum or possible upheaval. However, according to Suetonius, after a 2-year stint in Germania, which lasted from 10–12 AD, Tiberius returned and celebrated the triumph which he had postponed, accompanied also by his generals, for whom he had obtained the triumphal regalia, and before turning to enter the capital, he dismounted from his chariot and fell at the knees of his father, who was presiding over the ceremonies, since the consuls caused a law to be passed soon after this that he should govern the provinces jointly with Augustus and hold the census with him. He set out for Illyricum on the conclusion of the lustral ceremonies. Thus, according to Suetonius, these ceremonies and the declaration of his co-princeps took place in the year 12 AD, after Tiberius returned from Germania. But he was at once recalled, and finding Augustus in his last illness but still alive, he spent an entire day with him in private. Augustus died in AD 14, at the age of 75. He was buried with all due ceremony and, as had been arranged beforehand, deified. His will read, and Tiberius confirmed as his sole surviving heir.